Hey everybody, I hope you're having a great day. I have a new story for you and I'm excited to share it with you. If you do end up liking it, please like, share, and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. The Trenton Psychiatric Hospital stood tall and decayed, previously named the New Jersey Lunatic Asylum. It had been shut down and reopened over the years under different names. It opened in 1848. It was a place to amass the mentally unfit. The hospital still remains today, utilizing a small amount of the property to house about 400 beds worth of patients. A large portion of the facility, however, is decaying and abandoned. In their appropriate beds were Joey and Jordan. In another sect of the renovated building, Martha and Olive. Joey suffered from depression. Not your run-of-the-mill depression, however. He had suicidal tendencies and would often have a dark and gloomy demeanor. This, however, did not stop him from drawing to cope with his illness. He would create the most amazing black and white pictures, generally centered around the horror genre. Jordan was a high-grade schizophrenic. He had a lot of fight in him, however. He was mildly aware of what was certainly real. He often heard voices and saw shadowy figures stalking him. Martha had extreme anxiety. She was scared of just about everything, and felt the world was out to get her. She would commonly have panic attacks. Through her long-term treatment, however, she had learned to try and push through all of it. She would close her eyes, breathe methodically, and count to 10, then proceed to force herself to trudge through whatever the task at hand was. Olive had PTSD. She rarely talked about what happened to her. The therapist knew she was horribly abused as a child, and she quite often could not trust people and would stay away from men. This, however, didn't stop her from fostering an amazing friendship with Martha. The four had decided to sneak out and explore the abandoned parts of the facility that were closed off to the public. Jordan was excited to sneak out. He was more adventurous than the rest of the bunch. Joey was excited as well. It's not often that he would feel excitement, but he knew he would find some truly ominous things to draw on his trip through the abandoned buildings. Olive was terrified, so was Martha. But they put up a front in order to try and impress each other with their bravery. That night, they all set out to escape by asking to go to the bathroom. They had all shown great promise, having been at the hospital for years at this point, and they were on an honor system. No residents had to follow them around. Especially Jordan, because when they used to, he would mistake them for his shadow figures and would start running away in fear. Joey and Jordan looking at the clock inside of their bathroom. Martha and Olive doing the same. At the strike of midnight, mind you, this was the time the least staff was around, increasing their odds of getting away with their little escape. They all jumped out the bathroom windows to proceed running into the abandoned building's entrance, which had been forced open by many urban explorers of the past. Joey, being an artist, had quite the fascination with the asylum, and trying to scare the bunch, he stated, "In 1907, Dr. Henry Cotton was introduced to the hospital. He believed he could cure patients from removal of their various organs. He treated syphilis by removing teeth, believing that the bacteria would not be able to grow. He believed mental illness was actually disease, and proceeded to remove testicles, ovaries, gallbladders, stomachs, and colons in order to cure the patient's afflictions. Many of his patients had perished. Dr. Cotton would die in 1933, however, his horrible treatments would remain common practice till the 1960s. At this, Jordan was intrigued. However, this also had sparked Martha's anxiety. Martha spoke up, stating, "I think we should head back. This isn't safe." Jordan spoke up. "You're not scared, are you?" Olive gave Jordan a dirty look and started consoling Martha. At that, Jordan thought he saw a shadowy figure appear at the nearby staircase. Over the years, he had been told to confront his delusions. Out of complete mania, he bolted towards the stairs and disappeared up them. Joey started after him, yelling, "Hey, stop! Wait up!" Then he looked back at the two girls and said, "What are you waiting for?" The two girls looked at each other, shrugged their shoulders, and followed the group. When Joey and the two girls reached the top of the steps, it was eerily quiet. They called out for Jordan, but heard no response. Scared to all hell, Joey would pull out his camera, not only to take pictures and videos for inspiration, but to use the flash as a guide for their adventure into this dark hallway. They came upon a room, and there was Jordan, standing in the corner, talking to what seemed like nobody. Martha and Olive were standing outside the room. Joey walked up and said, "Hey buddy, are you alright?" Putting his hand on Jordan's shoulder. Jordan quickly turned around. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. Jordan explained, "He was right here. I chased him into this room. He looked like a nurse." The group scanned the room, but to no surprise, there was nobody there. They told Jordan he was probably seeing things, and Jordan took their word for it. He knew sometimes his view of reality was warped. The group proceeded down the hall and searched the various rooms. There was rows of beds and sun, and other baths, chairs, and amenities you would assume to be in such a place. They came upon a door that was heavy and immovable. Jordan saw another figure dart across the corridor from which they came, but this time Olive saw it as well. She was not one to speak much due to her past traumas, but she sure spoke up now. The man was wearing scrubs, but they couldn't make out much else. To that, they all had been quite frightened. Martha was shaking in horror. Joey had been able to catch him on video. He rolled back the footage, and although the video of the man was blurry, he scrolled through the tracks slowly to find the entity had peered over at them. His eyes were dull, as if he was blind in both eyes. They couldn't make out much else due to the sheer distance. The group was horrified and started running in the opposite direction. They then ran up a flight of stairs, planning on running back in the direction they had came from to the large main stairwell they initially had come in on. They could tell that it was an emergency fire staircase spanning every floor of the building. The floor was caving in certain spots on this level and was not stable. That group in their fear just bound down the decrepit hallway. Eventually they had ducked into a room to seek cover for a moment and catch their breath. They all were absolutely exhausted. It wasn't often that they were up so late. Jordan peered out of the window. The floor gave way beneath him, and he had fallen through down to the room beneath. It was filled with jars of liquid and medical instruments. He screamed and was absolutely terrified. Martha was shaking uncontrollably, counting to 10 over and over again. Olive and Joey trying to console her, but with little success. Jordan yelled from the room, "I can't move. I think I broke my leg." The three knew what they had to do, but they hated the idea of it. They proceeded to backtrack down the flight of stairs, listening for Jordan. All they could hear is his immensely growing screams. It was coming from the sealed door. Joey yelled to him, "We'll get help, just calm down." They proceeded to walk towards the emergency fire staircase, sadly in the same direction they had saw that white-eyed man. They were planning on traveling down the many flights of stairs to go outside and get help, but since the majority of the corridors were very similar, they had gotten lost along the way. The three walked into a room to see if maybe there was a window they could peer out of. The room seemed like some sort of lounging room. Outside they could see the entrance that they had come in from. They planned a route to the front door the best they could from inside that room. They would seek further into the room to see if they could find some weapons to self-defend if that man were to find them. Joey found a loose piece of wood. When they searched further into the room, they were hit with a horrible stench. Joey peered around the corner, deep into a room connected to the one they were in. Inside there was multiple people, bloodied skin as if it was falling off. They were just standing there facing the corner. They turned around and looked at Joey with their eyes. They were white and lifeless. The group of deranged, half-dead looking people started chasing them out of the room. They bolted in the direction they knew would bring them to the exit. But when they reached the emergency stairwell, there was more of these zombie-like creatures. They diverted back down the hallway. They now were familiar with the corridor that they were in. It was nearing the sealed door poor Jordan was behind. But now his screams sounded muffled. Joey and Martha were nearing the door when they looked back. Olivia was behind them trying to catch up when a group of these deranged people broke through the door in front of her. The group of decaying humans stood between her and the two others. She screamed. There was nowhere to go. Two male zombie-like people were trying to grab her arms. Her PTSD had kicked in. She thrashed and screamed, "No, not again, never again." This was quickly followed by her turning around and leaping out of the window, falling down many stories. Joey and Martha heard her plummet to the ground, her intense scream fading and then inevitably stopping with a crashing sound. She had landed on a metal awning below. Joey and Martha were horrified, but the creatures were now facing towards them and walking in their direction. They looked in the opposite direction and there was more of these deformed people coming towards them from that way as well. They looked back at Jordan's door to see it was cracked open. Knowing that it was firmly sealed shut before, they figured their best hope for surviving was to seal themselves in there with Jordan. They quickly poured into the room, slamming the door behind them. One of these creatures had stuck their decrepit hand into the door, but when they slammed it shut, the hand broke off with ease, filled with pus and falling apart. They turned around after latching the door to see Jordan. He was strapped to a chair in the center of the room. The two were confused. How could this be? They took a few steps closer to see a large portion of his skin was missing. Jordan was trying to speak, but his teeth were all gone, and he was bleeding from just about everywhere. Next to him was a surgical table and jars, but these didn't seem like they had old organs in them. They seemed fresh. The two stifled their screams. Martha fell to the ground and just started crying, counting to 10 over and over again. Joey had a very sad look in his eyes. He knew Jason's death was imminent. He decided to comfort the poor soul as Martha lost it behind him. He put his hand on Jordan's back. He knew Jordan's death was imminent. He decided to comfort the poor soul as Martha lost it behind him. He put his hand on Jordan's back, which was one of the last places he still had skin. He told him, "I am so sorry, buddy. Relax. Just let go." Jordan looked at him with the one eye that was still in his head and spurted out blood. He eerily whispered, "Run." That's all he could make out before looking towards another steel door in the room. The sounds on the outside of the room had stopped. Joey tried to calm Marcia and then told her what Jordan had said, and they both just looked at each other, horrified. Seeing what happened to Jordan, they figured a plummet to the ground was better than that, and they just had to get out of there. Joey opened the massive metal door to see a completely empty hallway. They both knew, peering outside the door, that the staircase to their left would lead them to a lower level at least. Then they could jump out a window to safety if need be. Joey looked at Jordan one last time. He had died at this point, head cocked downwards. The two rushed out of the room, their game plan set on how to get out of there. They rushed to the staircase and were stunned. These creatures lined the stairs, up and down, just like the emergency staircase. Then from their left they heard a door creak open, the deformed humans pouring out of the room. They started running back towards the room Jordan had met his fate in, hoping to find another stairwell in that direction. But the zombie-like creatures now were bounding back down the hall towards them from that direction as well. Martha dropped to the ground. She was so terrified and panicking, she couldn't even function. Joey started to run. He knew there was nowhere to go, but he figured maybe he could break through the crowd that was coming towards him. He rushed into one of the creatures, their body falling apart on impact. He proceeded to smash through many of these zombie-like people with the piece of wood he found earlier, trying to get past them, but there was too many. The creatures surrounded him at this point, and they proceeded to stockpile on top of him. Joey fell to the ground, hitting his head hard, and passed out. When he came to, he was bound to a chair in the previously sealed-off room. He looked around. Jordan was no longer there. A pile of blood lay at Joey's feet. He looked to his left. There, the door that Jordan had told him to run from. To his right was Martha, or what was left of her. Also strapped to a chair, she lay limp, lifeless. The door to his left flung open. In walked a man in a doctor's uniform. It looked old but wasn't very tattered. Joey yelled, "What do you want from me?" The man said in an eerie, crackling voice, "No need to be rude, we will fix that." His voice sounded oddly like Jordan's. He proceeded to walk over to Joey. Joey was strapped down quite well. He couldn't move his head or body and just sat there screaming, "Leave me alone, stop, stop." His sentence was cut short as the doctor proceeded to put an old muzzle over his mouth. The muzzle was covered in blood that he assumed was a mixture of Jordan's and Martha's. Joey could smell an awful stench, the same stench he smelt while breaking through that crowd of decaying people. The doctor continued, "My name is Dr. Cotton. I've been here for quite some time." Joey's eyes widened. "I've performed surgeries on many patients, trying to cure their ailments through organ removal." The doctor cleared his throat, spitting up blood as he did, Joey's eyes darting as he looked at Dr. Cotton's face. His face was stitched together. In fact, the majority of his body was stitched together from what he could see. The doctor continued, "They thought I was trying to cure patients, but I was trying to cure the human condition. You saw my puppets out there, mindless, wretched creatures. Over my time here, I have found various ways of prolonging life, my life, and theirs. I knew if I came out to the public with my research, it would have all been in vain. In 1933, I had my death forged, and then I continued my work here well into the 1960s. Joey tried to move, but there was no use. "You see, young man, you are what I need. You are a valuable asset. Your friend? What was his name?" "Ah, yes, Jordan. He gave me what I needed for the most part, but his brain was, let's say, a bit fuzzy. You, however, seem to be a strapping young lad." He then ran a scalpel across Joey's scalp, but not with enough force to cut. "You managed to injure a great deal of my staff. They have been with me for many years, delivering my organs, and after the 1960s, procuring me patients that no one would ever miss. Over time, however, during our many shutdowns, organs became scarce. An explorer here, a murderer there, but not many people would enter a building so decayed. I could not keep all of my faithful in shape, but I kept them going the best I could. Don't worry, I'm not going to remove much from you, my dear boy. Your friend supplied me with most of what I need." Joey's heart was beating out of his chest, his mind racing. "You, however, owe me manpower, my dear boy. I will take what I need from you, but I will leave enough so that you can repay your debts." Joey was shaking the chair back and forth, trying to free himself, but it was no use. The doctor proceeded to wheel a surgical table over to poor Joey. Joey would stare at the doctor as he made his way towards him with a scalpel and a handsaw in hand. Joey's eyes widened as the doctor cut into his scalp, from his forehead to the back of his neck, proceeding to pull his skin back, revealing his skull. Joey could then hear sawing. He could feel the vibrations jolt through his body as the doctor cut. Joey's muffled screams doing him no justice. The doctor said, "Ah, here we are," as he removed a piece of skull. Joey could hear a squishing noise, and very quickly he was met with complete darkness. The next morning, the groundskeeper was doing his rounds when he found Olive. Miraculously, she was still breathing but gravely injured. He called an ambulance and somehow they were able to keep her alive. They put her into a medically induced coma and over months her body would heal. She was now paralyzed from the waist down. That in and of itself was a tragedy, since the feeling of immobility triggered her PTSD immensely. She was then admitted to a psychiatric ward, a great deal away from the Trenton hospital. She wanted to be as far away as possible. As soon as she could, she told the authorities what happened when she woke from her coma, but they found no trace of the 3 other patients and couldn't find any evidence to back her claims. With years of therapy, her physical and mental condition had gotten much better. However, she was still haunted by what went down that fateful night. Her therapist instructed her to face her fears, to not fear her accusers but fight them with her newfound strength. At that, she decided it was time to visit the old Trenton hospital. Her plan was to just go outside and look at the region at which this all took place. As she got out of her taxi, she told the driver to wait for her. She grabbed her wheelchair and hoisted herself onto it, denying the help of the driver. She was still very set on being an independent woman. She wheeled up to the courtyard she had fallen into all those years ago. She looked upon the awning she had fallen onto. It was still crumpled from where she had landed. She looked up to the window she had jumped through, and there she saw something she would never forget. A man was standing there, in the window, looking down at her, his eyes a glossy white. It was Joey. I hope you enjoyed this story. Fun fact, this hospital does actually exist. There is actually 400 beds that are currently being rented out, and there is a large portion of it that is falling apart. Dr. Cotton actually started working there in 1907 till 1933 when he passed. He did take out the organs that were stated, and it was common practice until 1960 that they would remove organs to try and cure mental illness, killing most of their patients. The hospital since then has shut down 2 separate times and gone over a total of 3 names. It is now called the Trenton Hospital. I really enjoyed writing the story, and I really enjoyed the use of multiple mental illnesses while being in an asylum. If you did like the story, I ask that you please like, share, and subscribe. It would mean the world to me. I hope you have a great day.